An architecture student's guide to politics and power. Let's begin by looking at representative politics, introducing fearless leader number 1 with his famous election rallying cry, "No cuts to health, no cuts to education, no cuts to the SBS or the ABC." Introducing fearless leader number 2, his main distinction from number 1 is that he disagrees with this man because he's not him. However, coming from the School of Architecture and the Built Environment, we are not concerned with representative politics, so no to Shorten and no to Abbott. If it's not about representative politics, what are we really talking about? The term politics can be considered as spatial politics, and the term power can be translated as agency. So let's begin to visualize this relationship. We have space becoming agency. This leaves us with a question. How does space gain agency? It does this through what we can call a process of politics. And we can ask a series of questions around this. What is this process of politics? How does it represent itself in the built environment? And what forms can this process take? Let's look at what this process is. Let's start by drawing out something as simple as a square. And then let's fill that square with people. This is important because this process of politics is the relationship between how people encounter specific formations of space. And let's say that in this square these people are actually at an event, by the balloons of course. And perhaps this isn't a square at all, perhaps it's a park, so add some flowers in there too. And then perhaps this square itself also has traffic to compete with, so we'll throw in some vehicles as well. We also know that space competes with the seasons. Space changes during sunshine, during rain, and of course during the cycles of night and day. This gives us what we can categorize as thresholds of potentiality, and we've listed 3 here. There's how space is designed to be used, and that's us as architects. How space is actually used, and that's by the people in the space. And how space is misused, a common form being protest. But we also know that spaces can be designed specifically for protest. Now let's look at how this process represents itself in the built environment. So we can consider who owns a space. Is that determined by how the space is used, or by how the space is zoned? Does a space have a hierarchy of uses? Is it a local space, a global space, a public space, a private space? And how do we define the city itself? Is it defined by its size, the practices performed there, or perhaps the demography that inhabit it? Let's look at what forms this process can take. Materiality. People have a different materiality, like pavement. Vehicles have tarmac. Children use rubber materials in playgrounds, and of course, the natural environment has its own distinct materiality. There's the development process. Have stakeholders been consulted in new spaces? In whose interest is space being given agency? And perhaps in this development process, is agency being removed from a space? Let's look at the question that this subject is really all about. How can we best utilize our training from the architectural discipline to explain and interpret this process? And this deserves a big question mark. In these early weeks, we've been looking at 5 representative methods to examine the city. First of all is mapping, and this will enable you to explore sites and draw squiggly lines all over them on your tracing paper. We also encourage you to do interviews and ask the people using the space why they use the space and how they use the space. There is, of course, for those brave enough, the essay format, and I'll let this little essay speak for itself here. There's also the representative method of photography, how we can capture the active process of space in a single static image or perhaps a series of static images. And lastly, there's the infographic, visually communicating the important issues of the city, such as how many cats are there in relation to how many people, and the unimportant issues like a percentage of a person's income that's devoted to renting a property as opposed to a percentage of their income that goes towards mortgaging a property. All of this will form a reading of the city of Adelaide, and in doing these methods and learning these new ways to interrogate space, we hope you can learn that Adelaide is perhaps not just a city of churches, but something else. Something else that in this case can form Book 1, Politics and Power.